All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really fascinating philosophical text. It was written by Deiform Buddha back in 2007, and, well, it literally peels back the layers of human spirituality to try and answer some of the absolute biggest questions we could possibly ask ourselves. So, let's see what we can uncover together. The text actually kicks off by pointing us toward one massive anchoring question. What are we cultivating? I mean, it's a mystery that has driven humanity for centuries, right? Are we cultivating our minds, maybe our bodies, our souls? Let's take a look at how this specific framework actually attempts to solve that. Okay, let's dive into this. The author starts out pretty broad, looking at the macro goals of some spiritual paths you're probably already familiar with. For instance, Confucianism practices the cultivation of humanity. Taoism, they focus on celestial beings. Buddhism's dedicated to becoming Buddhas, and Christianity really emphasizes love. It's a very clean, structured way to map out the primary focus of these major religions. It basically gives us a baseline before the author introduces their own unique framework. But right after that, the author pivots sharply. Instead of those broad goals we're used to seeing, we dive into the highly specific goals of the Lifechanyuan philosophy. And instead of just zeroing in on one word, it outlines a really distinct 5-part cultivation goal. According to the text, practitioners are cultivating 1. Reverence for the greatest creator, reverence for life, reverence for nature, following the way of the greatest creator, and ultimately achieving the fruition of a super celestial being. Wow. It's a very comprehensive, ambitious list, and it immediately raises the stakes. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we get to layer 1, nature, love, and Tao. You see, the text doesn't just leave us hanging with that complex 5-part list we just talked about. Instead, it starts peeling back the layers of this philosophical onion to synthesize those massive goals into something much more unified. The author essentially boils down the absolute essence of cultivation and practice into 3 seamlessly integrated words: nature, love, and Tao. The text explains that if you were to open Pandora's box and peel back layer after layer, calculating every single possibility, what's ultimately left at the very bottom is nature. Furthermore, it asserts that as long as there is love in your heart, you've merged with the greatest creator. And the whole purpose of cultivation? It's simply to enter the Tao. It's marvelously simple when you really think about it. The author makes this bold claim that any method, sect, or individual that revolves around these 3 words in their practice is, well, completely correct. In fact, the text explicitly asserts this. Nature is love is Tao, and Tao is nature. The author posits that there is absolutely no essential difference between these 3 lofty concepts. They aren't separate checkboxes you have to tick off. Rather, they act as a single, unified truth. Basically, if you understand one, you understand the whole shebang. But of course, philosophy is only half the battle, right? How do you actually put this into practice? Let's move to layer 2, the 4 steps of practice. Let's move to this and see exactly how it builds. The author acknowledges there are countless methods out there, sure, but they outline 4 distinct, sequential steps as a sort of shortcut for practitioners. First, enhancing understanding. Second, transforming thinking. Third, perfecting consciousness. And fourth, perfecting the non-material structure. It's quite literally a step-by-step program. Let's break that first half down a bit. Step 1 is all about enhancing understanding, which means fully grasping the true connotations and extensions of nature, love, Tao. The text argues that without this correct foundational understanding, everything else is just mere talk, just aimless confusion. Then, step 2 builds directly on that by transforming thinking. The author describes this as thoroughly correcting erroneous worldviews, life views, and values that have, accumulated over thousands of years. The stated goal here is to take our utterly chaotic human thoughts and thoroughly organize them into a structured program entirely focused on the way of the greatest creator. From there, we move into the deeper structural changes. Step 3 involves perfecting consciousness. The text defines this as cleansing the soul's impurities to completely unify our consciousness with nature, love, and Tao. Now, step 4 is perhaps the most intense part of the methodology. It's about perfecting the non-material structure of life. And they actually mean this quite literally. The author describes continuously elevating life by physically removing animalistic, demonic, and, wildly enough, even humanistic genes from your very structure. The whole aim is to completely align the nature of one's life with purely celestial qualities. So, what exactly is the promised outcome of these 4 rigorous steps of purification? Well, the text outlines specific, ethereal realms of existence that successful practitioners are meant to ascend to. It mentions progressing from this life to higher realms known as the 1,000-year world, then up to the 10,000-year world, and ultimately reaching the celestial islands continent of the Elysium world. And that brings us right to layer 3, the core, the true purpose of life. We are finally at the absolute center of our philosophical onion. To reach this absolute core, the author poses a massive, almost existential question. Without life, what is the use of the universe? It's a profound thought experiment, and it actually pivots our entire explainer away from the ethereal, straight into a shockingly relatable, grounded conclusion. To answer that huge question, the author grounds this esoteric philosophy by looking directly at our mundane, everyday human activities. I mean, think about what we do every single day. Working, farming, raising a few sheep, growing flowers in the garden, running businesses. The text specifically uses these super ordinary examples to ask us to critically examine our own motivations. What does all of this daily activity ultimately serve? And then, the author rapid fires these relentless questions to really simulate the exhausting rat race of human ambition. Why make money? For survival? And what is the purpose of survival? For the next life? For love? For obtaining a PhD? For bringing honor to one's ancestors? For human peace? What are these purposes ultimately for when you trace them all the way back to their very root? It's a mental exercise designed to completely strip away all of our societal conditioning. When you trace it all back to the root, the text argues the answer is astonishingly simple. So the crucial point is joy and play. If not for joy and play, the author asks, why have life at all? The ultimate goal of all those human activities we just listed, the degrees, the money, the businesses, is simply to attain happiness and joy. This actually brings everything full circle beautifully. The text states, the core of Nature Love Tao is the enjoyment of life. This profound realization connects the absolute highest spiritual concepts we discussed earlier directly back to the simple, foundational concept of everyday joy. The author states that this enjoyment is, in fact, the very way of the greatest creator. Once this specific direction and goal are firmly set, the text argues everything else becomes incredibly simple. To make life joyful and to sustain, enhance, and extend this characteristic is the ultimate goal. The author even notes that this is exactly why they have always worked to create an atmosphere of joy and playfulness within the Lifechanyuan community. Why? Because it directly aligns with aiming for the perfect structure and ultimate goal of life itself. Which leaves us with a fascinating, actionable reflection to end on. When you look at your own life, your work, your ambitions, when you trace back the root of your own daily activities, does it ultimately bring you joy and play? It's definitely a powerful question to consider. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this dive into the source text has sparked some fresh curiosity about how you structure your own life.